In this demo, we're going to go over CSS Media Queries. Media queries are a feature of CSS that allows us to target different browser sizes. Mainly this will be important in thinking about mobile. So for example, if you want your website to look differently on mobile versus desktop, this would be the way to do it. And we will also talk a little bit about the inspector tool in Chrome. The inspector tool is really useful for debugging HTML, but in the case of media queries, it's actually also got this really great feature that allows you to simulate different devices. So you can kind of preview what your website would look like on an iPhone versus an Android versus a tablet, and so on and so forth. So we'll show that as well. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is create a folder for my project files to live in. And I've actually already done this. I've created a folder called Media Queries, and actually I'm going to remove the space there. When you're creating files and naming files, for this particular demo, we're pretty much going to just stick to index.html and styles.css. But just as a side note, when you're creating HTML files, I highly recommend avoiding spaces and capitals in your file names. It will just make your life easier. But yeah, so I'm going to delete that space there. And I'm going to open this folder in Sublime. So I guess I'll open up Sublime first. A quick note is that my Sublime icon probably will look different than yours. Don't worry about it. I just have some custom icons installed. Okay, so I'm going to go to File, Open, and I want to open up, not that folder, Demo Media Queries. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to right-click on the folder and create, I'm going to do Command S, but you can also do File Save, and I'm going to create this HTML file named index.html. And just as a reminder, your home page of your website always has to be called index.html. Other pages can be named how you please, avoiding spaces and capitals, but index.html has to be the home page. And I'm also just going to go ahead and create my styles.css file for my CSS to live in. Okay, great. And so I'm going to take a shortcut in setting up my HTML. So you're going to see a bunch of, I guess, starter code appear very immediately. But if you want to review kind of the basic setup of your HTML file, I would suggest going to last week's deck and looking at it there. But my shortcut, and this is Sublime specific, so if you're in VS Code, it might be a little different. But for me, I can actually do exclamation point and tab, and it will kind of autofill all this stuff for me, which is really helpful. But obviously it's also, great practice to write this out yourself when you're starting out. But I do want to point out it gives me a tag that we haven't gone over yet, at least in my section, which is this meta tag, this additional meta tag. We talked about meta care set, but we didn't talk about meta name viewport. This will kind of just ensure that the website is scaling correctly across different browser sizes. I can link in the description of this video to more information about exactly what that's doing, but for now, just know that we need to add that into the mix with our HTML setup as well. And I'm gonna now create a link tag to link my CSS file because I haven't done that yet. So I'm going to do link, and I'm going to take a shortcut as well, actually. So I'm going to do link and then tab, and you can see it nicely autofilled all this stuff. But I still have to write the name of my CSS file. Oh, styles.css. Okay, so now I can assume that things are connected. I'm going to rename document to media query demo just for fun. But I want some way of checking that, so I'm going to just write some, maybe like a header tag just to have something on the page, and then I'll go over to my style sheet and change the color of that heading tag, excuse me. So I'm going to go here to styles.css, I'm going to do h1, and I'm going to do, I want to change the font color. And so this is one caveat of CSS. You would think that the property for font color would be font color, but it's actually just color. So that's kind of a weird one, but I'm going to change the color to blue. And so now if I view my index.html in my browser, which I'm going to do on my Mac by simply dragging that index.html file into Chrome, because I see a blue hello world, I know not only that my index.html file is working, but it's also connected to my style.css. If you don't see your styles reflected, it means there's probably something wrong with your link tag. So just make sure this is correct. But that's it for like basic setup. So now we can actually talk about media queries. So one thing we'll probably want to do, let's see. So now I need to decide, let's try something simple. So let's say I wanted to change, for whatever reason, the color of the hello world in different screen sizes. So let's say I want it to change to like red when I get about here. What I can do is write a media query that says, as long as the width of the screen is less than a certain amount, h1 will be red instead of blue. Do @media to signify that I'm about to write a rule here, the media query here, and I want, and this is where you really need to think about what you want. Like, I want to change the color when the screen is at a maximum of 600 pixels. So I'm going to do max width 600 pixels. And so the way that the media query works is that any styles that are written within it only get applied based on the rule that you set. So for example, if I write h1 color blue or color red, this is basically saying when this is true, so when the width of the screen is 600 or less, h1 will have these styles applied to them. Otherwise, it'll be what's up here, default to what's up here, which is blue. So let's see what that looks like in action. I'm going to save it, go back to my demo here. I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to, yeah. So you can see at this point, which must be 600 pixels, it changes to red. Now you can have multiple media queries and they kind of waterfall, so to speak. So for example, if I had, let's say, let me put a media query above this one. So let's say I want it to change to green first and then to red. So maybe when it's at like 900 pixels wide, it'll change to green. And then when it gets to 600, it'll change to red. So let's see if I wrote that right. Okay, so we're less than 600, so it's red. Now it's green. And then when I get to 900, it'll be blue. Now, when you're thinking of these rules, you do have to be a little bit careful not to mix and match min width and max width. So for example, let's see, how can I mess this up? So I think it gets really confusing and you'd want to just pick one or the other to work with. But for example, if I did min width, this is saying when the width of the browser is not a minimum of 900 pixels or larger, change the color to green. So let's just see how that's different. So I'm less than 600, it's going to stay at red. Now it's blue because it's greater than 600, but watch when it gets to 900, it will change to green. And so, I mean, it works, but it's very confusing to read, right? Like I think it's much, it's confusing to me to have the default be in between these two states, right? So I would stick to using probably only you probably will only need one media query, which is like a standard mobile size, which I like to use 768 pixels. And I just know that from making websites, but you can also look up like what are the standard iPhone size, pixel sizes, and get different a different list of different ones. So I can try to find a good guide to link in the description of this video. But I generally use 768 pixels as kind of like everything within here is for mobile. Everything outside of that is for desktop. And let's try doing some other stuff. So we don't have much on this page to work with, so I'm going to add a little bit more here. I'm going to do, let's add a paragraph that says I'm on desktop, and another one that says I'm on mobile. And these are both going to show up, but what I want is for the desktop one to show up on desktop and the mobile one to show up on mobile. So I need some way of distinguishing these two because they're both paragraph elements, right? So this is a moment where I can use either classes or IDs. I think I can use an ID here because if I, for example, give this an ID of desktop, I'm not going to need to use this anywhere else. And remember, IDs are unique to that element, and elements are unique to that ID, a one-to-one relationship. And I think that's the case here, so I think I should be good to go. So I'm going to do mobile for this ID. And so now I have kind of a unique identifier that I can reference each of these separately with. And so in the CSS, I'm going to do, so if we think about it, I'm going to delete this for now. If we think about it, up here, this is our desktop styles, right? The default. So I'm going to set mobile, and I'm going to use the hashtag because it's an ID. I'm going to do, let's set it to display none. So it's gone. And let's just first see if that worked. So I shouldn't see mobile. Perfect. Okay, now I want to show mobile on desktop though. Mobile on when it's less than 768 pixels. So in here, I am going to write mobile display block. And let's see if it shows up when I make the screen smaller than 768 pixels. So I'm going to refresh. Yeah, and you can see it's showing up here. And I'm going to, I need to also hide desktop on when it's less than 768 pixels. So I'm going to do desktop display none. And let's see that works. So now it should appear like they're swapping, but really like, you know, they're being hidden or shown based on the size of the screen. And that's great. So now the other thing I want to show is how to use the inspector tool in Chrome. So the inspector tool you can get to, the easiest way to get to it I find is to right click anywhere on your page and click on inspect, and that should pull up the inspector window. And mine pulled up in a different window, as you can see, although for you it might look something like this. That's okay too. There's different options that you can get to from these three dots of how you want it to appear. I find it easiest to work with it in a different window, only because you can see when it's stuck in the same window, it's pushing your website so that it's only this wide. And especially if you're trying to debug something that's like about browser size, it's probably better to have it separated. So I'm gonna leave it as a separate window like this. But this is a tool that has a lot of different features. One thing that you'll notice immediately is that you can see the actual HTML of your page, which obviously you can get, you can see this in your HTML file, But in some cases, if you make a mistake in your HTML file and you're not sure if your paragraph is showing up in the right way, this can be really helpful for seeing how it's actually being rendered in the browser. And I can see this looks pretty much like how I wrote it, so I know that my HTML syntax is okay. And the cool thing is you can actually do this on other websites. So if you're on, I don't know, a different website and you're curious about how it's set up, you can inspect anywhere on that site and see the HTML of that website, and start to hover over to see specific elements. But that's for another time. Let's go back to our demo. So the inspector here, the main thing I wanted to show in relation to CSS Media Queries was actually this tool right here, which looks like a little phone and a tablet. This allows you to simulate different devices. So if I click on this, I can see I now have this screen pop up, which is showing this is showing my website as it might look like on a Pixel 5 phone. And I now have all of these options. I can see, okay, is it going to be red? I don't know if 768 applies to tablet, for example. So I can check here. I can say, okay, let me look at it on an iPad Air. Okay, no, it looks like the iPad Air is at 820 pixels wide. This is another place where you can start to check the actual dimensions. If I wanted that red to happen here, then that means I would have to, if I wanted it to change to mobile when I'm getting to an iPad Air size, I need to look at the dimensions here. So this is 820, so I might go back here and change 768 to 820. And then you'll probably see the difference. Yeah, so you can see now that is the cutoff now. So that can be another way of figuring out what that exact pixel value should be for your media query. I have no idea what a Nest Hub is, but that's kind of cool. Is this for your car? Interesting. But yeah, as you all probably know, there are so many different sizes of phones these days. It can be really hard to keep up with all these different sizes. But generally websites, I think, as long as you have mobile versus desktop, which is most likely what you'll be dealing with, but also another big one is tablet size. So websites might have 3 different designs, one for desktop, one for tablet, and one for mobile. And that's kind of how you manage those styles with media queries. So I hope that was helpful for you. As always, reach out with any questions, and I will try to add all of the links to the references I mentioned in the description of this video. Thanks so much.